Panelists, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. My name is Rashad Ali. I'm the Executive Director of Parliamentary Monitoring Group. I'm pleased to welcome everyone to today's 25th celebration of the PMG website and to deliver brief opening remarks. Thank you for being here. This is indeed an important milestone. The website is the face of the organization and is the vehicle through which we help to document and strengthen democracy through information. It's not always easy to recognize significant moments. While we are in those moments, it can be challenging to tell a story of change and transformation while we're going through it. That is why days like today are important to reflect, recognize, and celebrate the vision and collective effort of many who have made a contribution and made this day possible. It's not by accident that we are commemorating this occasion on the same day as the International Day for Universal Access to Information. Access to information is foundational and vital to citizens' participation in the democratic process. It is at the heart of what PMG does. The right to access to information allows for better transparency and accountability of public services. It makes it easier for journalists, NGOs, for citizens to cross-check sources and identify and uncover corrupt behavior. Parliamentary committees are fundamental arenas for state of government insights, decision-making, and power. With the help of PMG, there is consistent watch over these committees. There documents what is promised and planned, what is actually achieved and the reasons it's unachieved, how this is overseen, and how ministers are or are not held accountable. Again, we were intentional when we decided to host this event at this venue. 6 Fifth Street has historical significance, as this is where it all started. PMG was a project of IDASA and emerged out of a partnership between the Black Sash Human Rights Committee and IDASA in 1995 to monitor the proceedings of parliamentary committees meetings on behalf of other advocacy organizations. These three bodies collaborated and managed to build up a team of volunteers who were reimbursed for their transport costs only to attend and take handwritten notes from the meetings they attended, which were then circulated via fax between the three organizations. A lot has changed since those early days. Over time, it became apparent that there has been a greater need in broader civil society for independent, unbiased, consistently accurate, and timely information about the workings of committees, which was not available from official parliamentary sources to enable other bodies to monitor, intervene, and hold both the executive and parliament accountable. In 1998, we launched the PMG website, where we published reports and other targeted information. In the beginning, PMG monitored a select number of committees, but by 2000, PMG was able to attend all parliamentary committees. Initially, PMG managed to work without charging subscriptions, but by 2002, when donor funding was diminishing and costs were increasing, the decision was taken to charge subscriptions to commercial institutions and government entities for some committee reports to build sustainability. It's a practice that we still continue to this time. Despite consistent bureaucratic hurdles and a shortage of requisite resources, PMG has been able to grow, innovate, and expand in scope and ambition. When COVID hit and physical meetings were banned during the lockdown, PMG had to adapt to attending virtual meetings via Zoom platform. This was an interesting point in our history which we have navigated. While committee meeting reports remain the core of our work, we have published over 10,000 meeting reports in our lifespan. We offer a lot more. We created a second website, called the People's Assembly website, with tools to connect the public with their representatives through providing constituency information. We use our data and experience to produce research reports on the function of the legislature with the aim of raising standards. We continue to facilitate and amplify public inputs on draft legislation and other oversight matters. Attendance data, our innovative bill tracker, and comprehensive curation of parliamentary information are important features of our work. Our work on provincial legislatures and direct support provided to CSOs to support their work are key pillars of what we do. PMG has carved out a unique position in the South African landscape. Our non-partisan approach and consistent and reliable dissemination of information is relied upon by civil society, lawmakers, their staff, political parties, academia, law firms, commercial companies, and the public at large. We have always tried to play a constructive role to strengthen and support the legislature and government more broadly. We have recorded many successes over the years, including assisting the Zondo Commission and having our work cited and relied upon by civil society organizations in court matters. The challenges facing Parliament are long and well known. The Zondo Commission and other commentators have spoken at length about this. The actions and decisions of Parliament have consequences for people on the ground. Given the role it is meant to play, it is an institution that we should all care about. It is critical that parliaments are open, transparent, responsive to citizens, and seem to encourage citizens' participation in their work. This requires that the performance of Parliament itself is subjected to assessment by citizen-based groups and parliamentary monitoring organizations. Our work remains critical to elevate the debate, put a spotlight on government performance and corruption, help rebuild trust between the people and their elected representatives, and build a culture of involvement beyond elections. We all have a role to play to reinvigorate and reform Parliament. As I conclude my remarks, I wish to recognize the PMG monitors, who are our foot soldiers. They attend all the committee meetings on our behalf and capture the comments of MPs. As monitors and editors, let's just say it's interesting to see the full spectrum of how politicians operate. We have trained approximately 1,000 plus monitors, many of whom are or were students to write reports, giving them first-hand insight into the workings of Parliament and government. Many of our alumni are now successfully working in the public and private sector. A handful of them even became lawmakers. We are grateful to our staff, past and current, funders, partners, members of civil society, and the media who believe in us and have continued to support our work. Thank you, Kaz, for sponsoring the event. Thank you all once more for being part of these celebrations. We've gathered an impressive lineup of speakers and panelists, and we look forward to their reflections and input. I thank you.
Thank you, Rashad. And from my side, my name is Khalid Khalan. I'm the board chair. Feels like way too long. But also today is really a milestone in the history of PMG. And it feels like a meeting of friends. Friends who have walked this path also with us. So we'll get a sense of all of that with the speakers we've lined up. Now it's my real pleasure to invite to the mic an old friend, but someone who is an exceptional lawyer in the area of transparency and whistleblowing. Alison Tinney is formerly the director of the Open Democracy Advice Center, who did a lot of work on transparency and whistleblowing, and is a sister organization to PMG. So Alison was there at the very beginning, also of PMG, so walked that path with us. More recently, Alison has highlighted the issues around the other branch of government, the judiciary, and has really made it the point that judges matter as well for a healthy democracy. So the work of Judges Matter is critical and has shone a light in the appointments process of judges, but we've also seen that as politics has become more lawfare, how the role of judges and who gets appointed is so important. But we've also called you here because you're a member, part-time member of the Info Regulator, and today is the 28th of September, International Right to Know Day. So, International Day around access to information. So we thought it would be appropriate to share some
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you today. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words. Happy Right to Know Day. For those of you who don't know, today is the UNESCO recognized day, International Day for Universal Access to Information. For some reason, Right to Know just didn't make it as a name for the day, but universal access to information seems like a reasonable compromise. I think we take some of our right to know for granted. I think we sometimes think it's what we have is automatic, that it was just baked in somehow. And we don't necessarily go back and think about what we have actually achieved. And in relation to Parliament, I think PMG is a really good example of where things could have gone badly wrong and where in fact things went right. I think it's difficult to imagine now for people who are so familiar with the parliamentary process how mysterious it was originally in 1994 and 95. I remember coming to Parliament to do a workshop for members of Parliament on how a bill becomes a law. Adelaide Tambo happened to be in that workshop, and she was very aggrieved to discover that her speeches in the House were actually not as important as her work in the committees. And I think that was some of the early work we did around figuring out how important committees really are in Parliament. The engine room of Parliament, we call them, and that's really where most of the important work gets done, as apart from the theatre, which happens in the National Assembly. In order to keep track of what was happening in those engine rooms, I think originally we ran about, and I have to use the phrase ex-chickens, although Richard Cullen will not thank me for describing him as a chicken. But we had monitors in Parliament from different organisations. At the Black Sash, I had the advantage of having a group of volunteers who were very happy to go into parliamentary committees and take notes for me. So that meant I could learn about what was happening in more than one committee. And we tried to sort of develop so that there was somebody in a committee that was doing important work. But as you know, in the first 6 months to a year apart, the number of committees just exploded. And it was clear we weren't going to be able to get everywhere all the time. My volunteers were great, but also volunteers who would go do things like go off on holiday at a critical point in a bill being passed. And I would have then no idea what was happening. And we started to talk about putting it all together in one organisation. And we had this idea, and I'm not sure who exactly had the idea, but we thought that we could have something called a website. We were very encouraged by this idea. You could apparently update the information regularly, and people would be able to log on to their computers and would be able to see what the latest minutes were from meetings. And we thought this was going to be, a really great idea. And fortunately, we were right. And yes, we did get those minutes regularly, and we were able to see what was going on. I think one of the first things we thought was that this was such a great idea that obviously Parliament would want to do it themselves.
And why would Parliament not want a public record of everything that happens there? A rather naive question. But, and we in fact did meet, and as I recall it was with Max Sisulu, and said to him, well, we've got this thing running now. It's really quite cheap to run. You guys can you can take over, we can give it to you, it's no problem. And he said, well, there's going to be a significant catch, and the catch is we're never going to be able to agree on what the minutes say, which was alarming, but I think certainly an indication of what the political problems were with transparency, and remain to some extent. That transparency is uncomfortable, and it puts you often in a position where you really start to do things like have to be consistent. You have to have good arguments for things. You have to tell people what it is you're planning. And all of those things are difficult for politicians. And what we faced in PMG and in other contexts was committees sometimes really wanting to avoid that transparency. And a call would go out that a committee had decided that they were going to go into a closed session. Now, first of all, we knew that because there was a monitor there. We wouldn't have known otherwise. And secondly, there were a number of us who were absolutely outraged by that. I'm not sure why we were so very outraged. Perhaps because transparency is written into the Constitution, that the need for Parliament to be open is in the Constitution, but also because as people on the ground who are trying to advocate for rights to be respected and protected and good legislation passed, we knew how absolutely essential it was that those committees be kept open. And those foot soldiers in that war were there consistently to make sure that that space was held. And I'm not sure that we ever really think about that as an achievement. It seems, as I say, it seems normal, it seems natural.
But actually it's anything but. It's the result of civil society and PMG in particular, making sure that space was kept open, and that every time a committee was closed, that had to be justified by whoever was responsible for that committee or the committee chair. And I think we made the argument and have been able to sustain the argument around an open Parliament. I don't think we should imagine that that's always going to be the case. It may be, I think a friend of mine says that you must defend the gains. There's no such thing as a victory. You always have to make sure that you defend the ground that you've won. So yes, we have to keep making sure that those committees are open and that those records are kept. There are other institutions, and of course the courts are my next favourite institution after Parliament. And the courts, I think, have also on occasion been tempted to try secrecy as an option. And I think there was the big case involving SANRAL, where the Supreme Court of Appeal had to remind everybody that courts are open by default, and the records held by courts are open by default, and that they always are so, and that if you're going to close a court, or you're going to restrict access to a court record, you're going to have to do so for a reason, and that reason is going to have to be justiciable. You're going to actually have to make the argument, which I think is, which of course is correct. The other area that we've I think found transparency to be harder to get than perhaps we thought at first was the question of party funding. And I know many of us in the room have had to think about party funding perhaps for longer than seems reasonable. I think we thought it was going to be a relatively simple thing. For heaven's sake, it's the records of donors. We all know that money drives politics. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And I think it seemed relatively straightforward and obvious that you needed the records of donations to political parties. And of course you'll know what the history on that has been.
And I gather even now, there are probably politicians in a smoke-filled room, or whatever today's equivalent is, probably a Zoom room, talking about how to make sure that those records are not made public for much longer. So again, I think we may assume that these victories are won, but as I say, there are gains to be defended. Another gain to be defended, and I'll sort of wrap up on this point, is the information regulator. Another fairly straightforward idea that was an unconscionably long time in coming. When we first started talking about it in 1997, 98, and from there on, and my partners in crime on that bill would include Richard Calland, who's in the audience, trying to find a way to put access to information, and as it turned out, privacy, but that's a story for another day, but access to information into some kind of institution, a commission, something that would be able to make orders for the release of information. Very simple idea, seemed compelling. I think the legislation creating the regulator was only passed in 2014. So 14 years of making the obvious point that you need somebody outside of government, a commission is what most people call it, that would make information accessible. It's not called the Information Commission, and I can tell you why. It's because Johnny DeLuca said that we didn't need any more commissions, because we had the Gender Commission and the Commission with the long name and the Human Rights Commission, and it was too many commissions. And I said that was of course correct, but this wasn't a commission, it was a regulator. And then I stared at him for a long time, and he stared back at me, and he said, oh, well, that's different then. And I was like, yep, it's completely different. So we now have the information regulator, which does what information commissions do around the world, which is to look at requests for information, and we make orders for release. We've only just started making those orders. I think our first access to information order has been in the last 2 months. It's, from my perspective, it's a glass half full. Yes, we're making orders, yes, we're releasing records, and yes, the first order for release of records was a very important one in the sense that it was records of royalties that were kept, and the request was on behalf of musicians who've been denied those royalties over the years. So it's a very good example of what we always said, which was access to information is a leverage right. It's a right that allows you to access other rights, and in this case, the right to intellectual property and copyright as well. But if you look at the regulation, that's a story for another day, but access to information into some kind of institution, a commission, something that would be able to make orders for the release of information. Very simple idea, seemed compelling. I think the legislation creating the regulator was only passed in 2014. So 14 years of making the obvious point that you need somebody outside of government, a commission is what most people call it, that would make information accessible. It's not called the Information Commission, and I can tell you why. It's because Johnny DeLuca said that we didn't need any more commissions, because we had the Gender Commission and the Commission with the long name and the Human Rights Commission, and it was too many commissions. And I said that was of course correct, but this wasn't a commission, it was a regulator. And then I stared at him for a long time, and he stared back at me, and he said, oh, well, that's different then. And I was like, yep, it's completely different. So we now have the information regulator, which does what information commissions do around the world, which is to look at requests for information, and we make orders for release. We've only just started making those orders. I think our first access to information order has been in the last 2 months. It's, from my perspective, it's
it's glass half full. Yes, we're making orders, yes, we're releasing records, and yes, the first order for release of records was a very important one in the sense that it was records of royalties that were kept, and the request was on behalf of musicians who've been denied those royalties over the years. So it's a very good example of what we always said, which was access to information is a leverage right. It's a right that allows you to access other rights, and in this case, the right to intellectual property and copyright as well. But if you look at the regulator and how many requests for information it's been received, we were always warned about the floodgates. There was going to just be this storm, hurricane. Requests for information were going to flood in from every side, and it would be unmanageable. Well, we now have a year's worth of requests for information, and there are a total of 350 that have come in. There's a reason for that, I think. I think people became tired of the Access to Information Act. It didn't work for so long. I think people gave up on it. And trying to rebrand it now as something that will work is proving challenging. It's also proving fiddly, and this is a problem that we identified a long time ago, which simply that it needs forms, and forms are filled in, and then you have to sign it here and send it there. All of that is a real problem. And what we're thinking now is that what you probably need is a portal where you can go and just type in the fields, and then that automatically becomes the request that then goes to the right place. We may be able to do it, but there certainly needs to be a lot of work done on making sure that the regulator does deal with access to information more thoroughly. If there's one thing I can leave you with in terms of the regulator and its role, I think that we are, and we have some survey data to back this up, we are perceived as independent. We are perceived as being able to make decisions, miraculously. And what I really want is to ask people to think about access to information requests, think about making them, and then making sure that they get followed up on. The regulator is a bureaucracy like any other. You need to do the due diligence on making sure that the request was received and someone's on it and they have the file and they're working on it. Because I think that, as I've said, I don't think we can just let it go. I don't think we can think that somehow transparency will happen without us doing the work. And as I've said, civil society has held so many spaces: open parliament, open courts, open justice. I would really like to see us being able to make sure that the spaces that we've created through legislation are also held open and work for people in a straightforward, simple, and easy way. So if on Right to Know Day, I can leave you with the thought that you have the right to know, but you're only going to have it as long as you exercise it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. For lots of thought-provoking ideas, one of which is that the info regulator is also going to open up the website, potentially, which is where PMG started.
Oh, another website.
I just want to maybe remember some of the things we were saying as challenges even that PMG has faced around independence, and that the information that we sit with, our brand is only our brand because we are viewed as independent and impartial, and we've fought long and hard as PMG to maintain that. And then the issue around quality control. We talked about the bureaucracy in terms of requests at the info regulator, but certainly quality control has always been something for PMG, and former director Gail Musman was quite strict about the quality of the information that BMG holds onto. And so this issue of information isn't a sexy one in South Africa, but it's so important for the health of our democracy. So thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah. So I'm going to now turn to a few more friends and call them up to join us in front here. I'm going to call on Judith February. Judith, many of you know, in multiple guises. In the day, Judith, near the start of PMG, Judith was with IDASA. I think my idea of Judith comes from her blog or her commentary as a political analyst. Judith's prudence. I went to Space Bona and our motto was Prudence Futuri, and you seem to embody that, a wise person of the future. But Judith also is currently the Executive Director of Freedom Under Law, and has held many positions in terms of also fighting for democracy and good governance. So that's Judith. I'm going to call everybody up so that you can join us. Huda Faker serves on the board with me and is currently the National Advocacy Manager for the Black Sash. So the Black Sash is obviously one of the founder members. Huda has also a distinguished legal career, also having been working through the sector as a senior attorney and in private practice, and she gives us hell on the board. So that's welcome, Huda. I'm going to call up Sia, if you can come and join us as well. Sia Mkibi is sauntering up as a good monitor does. Sia is one of our, the foot soldiers as they've been referred to, a monitor with PMG for many years ago, also share that experience. Monique Doyle. Monique is our head of operations, but really responsible at the core of PMG for making things happen. And we'll talk about some of the interesting things that happen there. And then Prof. Richard Calland, if you can join us as well. Chair. Just get a chair. Actually, we should take this one. I'll grab the chair to the side. Obviously, Richard also was was there right at the beginning, and I'm hoping he is. Earlier on, he said he's gotten to that stage in his life where he is now the raconteur, so he tells stories. But obviously, also Richard is associate professor in the Faculty of Law at UCT, and also is a fellow at Cambridge University, and so a keen political analyst and commentator. We have such a distinguished panel, so I'm very pleased. Okay, so I think I'm going to turn to you, Judith, first. And you've walked a long way. In fact, you ran the IDASA's equivalent of PMG, sort of, the Pilgrim's Project. And yeah, so maybe just some of your recollections of
Philip, and it's really lovely to be here. I must say it feels a little bit nostalgic also to be in this building and to see many familiar faces from very, very long ago. And so we're dating ourselves now by being on this panel as early members. So thank you, Philip, for that. It's been interesting also to listen to Alison's comments on the right to know. I think, so I joined IDASA, the Institute for Democracy in South Africa, in 2000, and then of course the Parliamentary Monitoring Group was in existence, of course, but as a project of the three organisations, the Black/the Human Rights Committee, and Frankie Jenkins, I saw him earlier, and he represented the Human Rights Committee at the time, and is now at Parliament. And of course, IDASA. And for some reason, I've been at IDASA for about, I don't know, 6 months, and I got dragged onto the board of PMG. That was interesting because I actually had no idea what I was getting myself into. But of course, as I got to know the work of PMG, and we've been using it at IDASA considerably, one realised then what a kind of goldmine of information it was, and also the application and the diligence that it took to actually run a project like this. And I don't see Gail here today, but I think we'd be remiss in not thanking her for laying that groundwork of the professionalism and also the very good grounding that PMG interns get. But, so PMG was different. I mean, I think we, I was in PIMS, the Parliamentary Information Monitoring Service, and that was monitoring Parliament, but in fact relying a lot on PMG's information. I think the point that Alison made earlier about open committees is so important because, yes, the political instinct and the instinct of politicians is to close things up. I mean, there were many, many meetings that I remember, and I was delighted that Nonhlanhla Chanza, who is one of our PIMS colleagues and who monitored Parliament assiduously, is here today and is on the board of PMG. Nonhlanhla will tell stories as well of committees that were just sort of closed at the drop of a hat. But we only knew this because there were people there. And PIMS was there, but PMG was there keeping a far better record than we did. Those early years, I would say, moving forward now, were quite hard once PMG had started to develop a brand and identity of its own. And I mean, there are lessons, I think, here for how institutions grow and how they develop and how they fly the coop in a sense. And there were many lessons for IDASA, and Philip was grinning because I was the poor sod on the board at the time, having to manage this transition. And it wasn't often pleasant, but we managed to get through it. And I think that PMG came out of that process stronger for its independence. In fact, and so the early years were sort of a mixture of things, but I think that just the last comment I want to make is to say that I personally don't get through a week without actually looking at PMG, and I have here has called my wonderful newsletter a blog, but it's fine. So to write that blog, I spent a lot of time trawling that PMG site, and the brilliant work that is there. And it's very interesting to me the way in which all of the committees are reported on equally, but also that there's a mixture of information for all kinds of rights. And so whether you're in civil society and you're thinking about the right to healthcare, social services, or whether you're a company and you want to access this information and you don't want to send somebody to Parliament, not there, but there. You don't want to send somebody to Parliament. It works, and this model that has been fashioned, which is part private, part commercial, part civil society based, I think is interesting. It's unique, and I think PMG should be commended for retaining that balance of objective information, but also information which is of use to the broader society, and which some people see has a commercial value as well, because that is also important. I'll leave there.
Thank you, Judith. Blog just dates me.
Watch this live.
Okay, we'll have some opportunity also to interact with our panelists afterward this, but I'm going to turn perhaps to Sia, who is one of the monitors in Parliament, to just speak from the heart about your experience over the years of doing the job.
Hi everyone, can everybody hear me? Okay. My name is Sia Gibi. I've been working for PMG for about 8 years now, approaching 9. I started working for PMG towards the end of the 4th administration of Parliament. And obviously, as everybody could tell, that from there till now, so much has changed in terms of how Parliament operates. So my experience as a monitor at PMG, it's rather a very boring one, but also it's been a roller coaster. It's been a journey, and one has grown so much from the opportunity that I was given to be part of the PMG family. So when I started working for PMG, it was towards August of 2015. And at that time, Gail was the executive director. And I think Ms. Tilly mentioned earlier on that she was very strict on precision and accuracy and the quality of the work. So you're looking at basically a product of Gail's work, somebody that was groomed by her. And around that time, I just moved back to Cape Town from Grahamstown, and I was looking for a job. So I think at about 3 months that I started working at PMG, I was able to get an opportunity to work as an intern. And at that time, I was monitoring meetings, and I was also assisting Megan Lessing, who was the coordinator for good governance for People's Assembly, our sister organization. So basically, that was the start of the many hats that I wore in my journey as a PMG monitor. And over the years also, I've been entrusted with roles of helping other monitors that are joining the PMG family. And Samuel is one of those monitors, and today he's a researcher for PMG, and many others as well. But I think the one thing that stands out for me the most in my experience as a PMG monitor was during COVID. I think COVID-19 showed all of us how Parliament's infrastructure needs serious attention, because there were instances, in fact, a lot of instances where it would be difficult for us as monitors to do our work because there's no infrastructure. The ICT infrastructure is I mean, like I think we've all experienced it, we've all seen. So, yeah, that also impacted on our work as monitors a lot, because we swiftly had to be introduced into now doing our work virtually, something that we've never been experienced before. But I think most of our monitors, because we're young and we're technologically savvy, we were able to adapt and move along with the program. And yeah, so I would say that COVID-19 really shook us up, and I'm hoping though that it did not impact on the work that Gail had laid as a foundation for the quality of work that we are able to produce. And so far, I mean, being a monitor for 8 years, besides external factors, I can't say that it's bad, but you know, it is work. It is work, it is a lot of work, but I really truly enjoy it. And I mean, I have a great relationship with my management as well. So, I mean, guys, really, I will take questions, you know, I'm not really good at this. Yeah, so, yeah, but if anybody has a question or, you know, like an experience, yeah, I'll be happy to share.
Which committees do you monitor?
Oh, I've monitored, I would say, mostly all committees in Parliament. Monique over here is very gracious. She puts me everywhere. But yeah, I would say most committees in Parliament I've monitored. My favorite is always, it was trade and industry back when the former chairperson of trade, Joel Fabs was the chairperson. And I also enjoyed the Standing Committee on Finance when Honorable Karim was the chair. And I think one of the highlights was being part of small business development, because when I joined PMG, I think it was one of the new departments, and so obviously the committee as well was just recently established. So just being part of that process and witnessing how a department is established and evolves and grows and gets appropriated budgets and create programs and how we plans to implement those programs. So that for me was one experience that I can say, I can say stood out for me. Just being part of that process, because it's a very technical and academic task. I would say small business, Standing Committee on Finance, and trade and industry, and obviously Scope now I do a lot. The new chairperson, he's young and very bright, so he makes it fun to be reporting on those meetings, and as well as the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education. Mostly Monique gives me the big portfolios with big appropriations. I don't know why. But yeah, I would say, yeah.
Thanks, Sid. Maybe Huda, if I could turn to you. Representing the Black Sash, still one of the founding organizations still standing out of the three. But also your national advocacy manager with the Black Sash. The initial impulse was always that we needed the information coming out of Parliament to enable the advocacy work of organizations. PMG itself doesn't do advocacy work on issues, but it enables that. So maybe some thoughts of how PMG's impacted your work.
Yeah, so we're 68 years old, and one of my predecessors is Alison Tilley, so I think it's important that to also that we always have this link somehow, you know, in terms of PMG and Black Sash. As a founding member, I represent Black Sash on the board, so there's that sustainable relationship and the always ensuring that why PMG was started still follows through, even though we have to adapt to the times. So I think what is important is to look at when PMG was started. Although the website was launched in 1998, the thought and idea of having information was in terms of when South Africa transformed into its democracy from 1995. And so it was quite a crucial and pivotal moment in terms of who Parliament would be, what it would constitute, and whether there would be an honest and efficient administration. And so I think the independence of PMG is crucial, especially today when you have so many issues within government. I won't go into what types of issues there are. But I think it was one of the quotes that I looked through in one of our annual reports was that there's a need for vigilance, got the word right. And that vigilance falls on the shoulders of civil society. And as an advocacy organization that's been advocating for social justice since 1955, when we had to fight apartheid, we wanted to ensure that the constitution that everyone fought so hard for was not just words, that it was actually a tool that civil society could use to hold government to account. And so I think in our advocacy work currently, PMG is really crucial. It's really a source of information in terms of understanding what is happening within Parliament, the committees, which is the engine of Parliament, they are oversight bodies, and we want to make sure, are they actually having oversight? Is there collusion? Is there independence? Is there transparency? And so those are one of the ways we access information. I mean, as an advocacy organization, we lobby with government, we engage with them. And Alison, I don't know if you recall, in one of the annual reports, I won't mention the year, you made a note and said, do we challenge or do we rule Parliament? And that's important, and that's why the information that we receive from these minutes is identifying what are the positions of the members, what are the positions of the committees, because it allows us to develop a strategy. And that's crucial, because at the end of the day, you need to be strategic in the advocacy that you do. And Black Sash has had to navigate that. We've engaged with Parliament, we're part of recourse forums, we've had ministerial task teams where Black Sash has represented civil society, but we know who we are as civil society and who we serve. So if we need to go to court and become adversarial, we've definitely done that. And the information that we receive from the minutes is crucial to develop our strategy, to determine the way we argue in court. But I think it's important also, not only in terms of access to information that PMG provides, but also what the monitors do and the skills that they develop and the opportunities that they are given. Because through that, we are then knowing PMG and the expertise and the skills that is developed. Organizations also lean on them. We've leaned on monitors to ask for assistance in terms of documentation, in terms of recording, because we know the skills that they have. And also, like Rashad did in his opening comments, there are now many monitors who've started out through PMG who are leaders today. And we anticipate that there will be many more leaders because of the opportunities and the vision that they were introduced to through PMG. But it's also important to note that there's also an education element within PMG, because they tell you how to write submissions. So, for example, Black Sash, who works with community partners who don't necessarily have the resources and capacity to access information immediately, Black Sash provides that intermediary where we share the information with our community partners. And through that, there is the filtering of the information that is much wider than only those who subscribe to PMG. I think it's important to note that the submissions are important, but it's also the education that they provide in terms of sharing of the information, what you can do, how you can do it. And I think on that note, it's much more than transparency, you know, in terms of all the services that PMG provides.
Thank you, Huda. And maybe turn to Monique, just to riff off what Huda has been talking about. We've heard actually already from the sort of blue chip NGOs and the academia about the space at Parliament. The dream in 1994 that this would become a people's parliament has also not really been achieved. And certainly access to Parliament has been a big challenge. And so one of the things PMG has tried to do is to at least make the information accessible. But reams and reams and reams of documents, etc., is still not accessible in many ways. And so PMG's also tried to explore other avenues of taking that information.
Yeah, so it allows me to segue into talking about our People's Assembly website, which is CSL is our sister website. And it was really started with the aim of another vehicle, another website in which to impart information. PMG's always been a website that those in the know can turn to. If you want the PMG website, you know what you're looking for. You know what Parliament entails. But there's such a large segment of our public, especially the youth, that's not familiar with Parliament. And so that was a unique opportunity for us to develop the People's Assembly website with the aim of connecting the public with their representatives. Our representatives are core to Parliament. They say very important things in committees, in plenary, but there's no record of that exists. And so that was the aim of the People's Assembly website. And of course, to shed light on constituencies and issues shrouded in much mystery. And so that was a big part of the People's Assembly website, as well as civic education. We show some of our infographics. Parliament is filled with presentations of dense information, and so that was an opportunity for us to break down that information, the average person. Something else I just wanted to share while I do have the mic. A lot of people have said that or have advocated for Parliament to produce their own minutes, and they do produce their own minutes, and it's nothing like the PMG minutes. And so I feel very strongly that there is value in having PMG as an independent organization to monitor Parliament, to oversee the overseers, to use a very cliche term. And I've been around with PMG for a very long time, since 2012, and I've seen the introduction of the PFF. And I was a monitor in a meeting of mineral resources in a very small venue. And Julius Malema was there. It was one of his first meetings he attended. And he stopped the entire meeting and asked who was that in the corner. Because the PMG visitors are always in the corner. And I had to explain to him what it is that we do. And he was astounded and really supported our efforts. And so I just wanted to share that anecdote. The importance of PMG.
Were you the author of Pay Back the Money? But one of the things, maybe just, is that PMG is sitting with a lot of information over the years. It's a huge repository of history of parliamentary committee meetings. How's that being utilized? Is it being utilized beyond just if I'm looking for a particular minute? Are there ways that that information is now being also utilized?
Yeah, I would certainly hope so. Something that's been really difficult for us to grapple with is to show our direct impact. So we have said, Buddha's mentioned it before, and you said that we don't advocate. And so the hope is that other organizations will use that information for great advocacy. Yes,
just to also add to the question that you asked, from my experience, I think the impact that you make as PMG, you see it in the interactions with the officials and even Parliament staff and some of the MPs as well. And I think that's how we can safely say that we can measure the impact that we make, because we get a lot of stakeholders, like obviously government stakeholders, that attend these meetings or present into the committees and talking about how important the work that we do. And sometimes you'll find that we'll have a meeting today, and by later on in the evening or the following day, they're already asking for the minutes. So I think that is telling of that as much as we cannot measure directly and showcase how we can, our impact, but the people in the committees, they talk about that. And I think that has also given PMG, especially monitors, a lot of leeway insofar as working with the officials in Parliament and to make our job easier.
All right. talked about some research maybe that's been done. And Rashad referenced the Zondo Commission approaching us for insight into what committees had done or not done, as may be the case, in relation to state capture. And so the issue around that information is that it was all there. And so the Zondo Commission could look at what MPs, how MPs had exercised or not exercised that oversight role, that very important oversight role, and keep Parliament accountable and honest. So on that sort of note, Richard, I'm going to turn to you, because also you were involved in a parliamentary process where you were going to serve on a committee, and so you have first-hand knowledge of Parliament and its responses to questions around transparency and openness and access. But you also have a long memory of PMG, so I invite you to reflect a little bit on where you see PMG fulfilling its role.
Thank you, Ali. It's very good to be working with you again. I want to say three things. So first of all, to thank the organisers of this event. You know, this was an invitation that I received with delight, and I accepted the invitation immediately with enthusiasm. And the reason is this, that organisations, when they reach certain milestones, do need to mark and celebrate those things. I had lunch yesterday with somebody who heads an organisation, Democracy Works, that is 9 years old, and he asked me for advice about the future. And I said, I have only one piece of advice, and that is next year you must have a massive party to celebrate 10 years. Because as Alison indicates, these advances are never victories, they are merely partial victories that have to be sustained with ever strengthening forms of vigilance, as you pointed out. And I think that's really important. So I congratulate everybody involved in this. My only regret is that it's at a point in the day where it's regarded as impolite to have a proper drink. Maybe next time it could be in the evening to allow for that. That's a minor gripe. The second thing, which is the nostalgic or the backward-looking piece, and I will get to the future eventually, in the third thing I want to say. But in the second, I want to look backwards, because sometimes that's important to do in order to look forward. You know, someone once said prediction is always difficult, especially about the past. I think it was Einstein, it was usually Einstein who came up with these quips. But, and I'm trying to resist the temptation to be that annoying person on the panel who substitutes anecdote for analysis. But I think as a founding parent of this organisation, I've probably got a small license to do so. Happily for you, and certainly for me, Alison's covered a lot of the ground, so I needn't bore you too much. But I do want to embellish, 'twas ever thus, Alison Tilley's version somewhat. Not just for the fun of it, but also because there are lessons perhaps to be learned about how organisations start and the path that they initially set for themselves. And it was the three of us, Alison Tilley, myself, and a third person, and one should always recognise absent friends. And the absent friend here, there's one who has been mentioned, Gail Wisdom, I don't think is here, and Gail played such an important role, and I'll come back to that. But the founding third parent was someone, I'm making it sound like she's no longer with us, she's very much with us, but in Johannesburg. And that is Justice, as she now is, Susanna Cowan, who at the time was the parliamentary monitor for the Human Rights Committee, an organisation that no longer exists, and probably most of the people in this room may not know of or have forgotten about, but it was an organisation based at UWC. Black Sash still exists happily, and of course the third was IGASA, Alison was representing. at the Black Sash, and I was representing the dark side. And we just started. It was a year or two into the new Parliament. And I wish I could say that the three of us sat down and in an act of strategic foresight and great and wise vision set forth on this journey that is now the 25-year-old PMG. We didn't. It was an act of sheer desperation. Because Parliament had created 26 portfolio committees. There were 26 government departments there. A mere 26, one might say. And now, and therefore 26 portfolio committees. And often 13 would sit at any one time. And you can all deduce that 3 is a smaller number than 13. And therefore we felt precarious in our roles as parliamentary monitors. We simply couldn't cover the ground. And we met at a restaurant in Long Street, whose name sadly I can't remember. It was something like Pepper Tree or Lime Tree or something like that, maybe you can remember. It was not only the healthiest restaurant in town. At that point in the 90s, it was the only healthy restaurant in town, selling salads and such like, which was revolutionary then. And we used to meet there regularly, the three of us. And over lunch, we decided that the only way we could survive as the only existing monitors of Parliament at that time was to recruit unsuspecting and naive young students who could be bought a cheap lunch, probably not at that healthy restaurant, but somewhere even cheaper, and who would cover the ground for us. And we thought this would be necessary for 6, 9, maybe 12 months. But here we are 25 years later. And that brings me then to the third point, which hopefully is a little bit more analytically substantive or forward-looking. And it's really about, and there's two elements to this, forgive me. The first is in the shadow that has been cast, the light that has been shone by former President Thabo Mbeki's extraordinary presentation, speech, rant, outburst, I don't quite know what to call it, but many of you may have seen the video that I think has gone now viral in the last 36 hours of his remarks at a public service management conference earlier this week on Tuesday, in which he talks with great passion and I think in many ways great insight about the hollowing out of the state and the inability of state and public institutions to fulfill their public mandate. And in a sense, that's what PMG is. That's how PMG started. We were stepping in as an independent, private, if you like, conglomeration to fill a gap that the state was unable to provide, or unable to fill itself. And obviously PMG has continued to do that. Now, Mbeki seems to think that this is a disastrous thing. He, perhaps for good reason, rails against concern that, in a sense, everything is being privatized out of necessity. And of course, that is a concern for those of us who believe in a democratic state. But on the other hand, first of all, there's no alternative to that. Secondly, it may not be a bad thing when independent organizations step into the breach. And as a number of you have said, Monique said it just now, and I agree with you, it would now, I think, be a mistake. It would be unfortunate for Parliament to step up and do what it probably should have done 25 years ago. We benefit from the independence of PMG. What then, finally, in conclusion, are the lessons that might be extracted from this story and which may have broader applicability in terms of the future of civil society, the future of such organizations that do step into these kinds of gaps? And how can they sustain themselves in the way that PMG does? And I must say, I do remember still the meeting at which the board sat with Gail Lisman, and Gail unveiled her plan to start to charge people for this information. And I confess to being highly suspicious of this. I honestly didn't think it was going to work. But, and this is a lesson, I trusted her because of the conviction with which she believed it was possible. So the lesson there is, if you're a board, trust your executive. Call them to account, yes, but trust them to live their dream and deliver on their ambition, because she did so, and she deserves huge credit for that. The other things I think that are unique, not unique to PMG, but which are distinctive characteristics and which apply to other organisations, and I speak as somebody who's been lucky enough to be involved in the founding of several organisations, some of which, like PIMS and IDASA, have closed, the Open Democracy Advice Centre. Others, like PMG and CASAP and the DGRU and the Judges Matter, continue to thrive. If I look at that landscape, what distinguishes the survivors from those that didn't survive? And this may be one-dimensional, even ahistorical, but let me offer it anyway. Firstly, their niche. Pick a niche, jump into that niche, and do so with conviction. So niche, number one. Secondly, and this is a Venn diagram, these circles overlap. Secondly, quality, and it's been referred to. The quality, and indeed the quality assurance, is essential, because in the end that's the only defense. When politicians attack you, and attack your motives, and attack your integrity, your only defense is the quality of your work. I learned that at IDASA. Thirdly, independence, that strongly held underlying principle that you are dependent on no one, even your funders, dare I say. You are dependent not on any political force or faction or grouping. You are there to serve the underlying principle, transparency in this case, the public information. And lastly, the legitimacy that flows from all that. Because in politics, legitimacy is the watershed test or litmus test for whether something is credible and ultimately sustainable. So thank you for allowing me to make those remarks. I'm really glad to be here. I wish everyone associated with PMG all the very best and happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. And so I want to turn it open to people from the floor. If you want to make some comments as well about your experience with PMG. We're sitting, I think, at also a crossroads, like everybody in South Africa. Next year, we're facing an election. PMG serves Parliament. What kind of Parliament are we going to get in 2024? It will be a generation of democracy in South Africa. And so the quality of our democracy is also being tested. PMG obviously has a role to play in that. What will that be is the question that is occupying the minds of PMG at the moment. So, if you have some thoughts from your own experience of PMG, some advice for us as we look forward, we very much appreciate that.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the esteemed panelists at PMG, Russia. Anyway, I'm Rachel, representing the organisation of the Tax Abuse, or ALTA otherwise known, with my colleague Chris. We would like to thank PMG and your board members and everybody for being in existence. We have a parliamentary engagement office here in Cape Town, and it's slightly ironic that without PMG, we would not really have been able to engage with Parliament. As you rightly know, we have these annual parliamentary oversight reports, and those would not have been possible without PMG. So we can only hope you to please continue as you are doing, continue growing, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you.
Hello everybody, my name is Alfred Paulus. I also serve on the board of PMG. Let me share with you what is called in my mother tongue, a staloki, a little story. And it involves the experience that Monique experienced some time ago. So, picture the scene. I worked for the South Parliamentary Office at the time, just down the road, no longer in existence. And I'm a spokesperson for COSATU. So we called up by the late Will, do you remember him? And the tent in front, there's going to be a speech. We have to give our perspectives to and to, because Leanne on us now. So seated next to me at the time was the Minister of Health, Aaron Montsoaledi, right? So we greet each other. And late and like a whirlwind, in comes our friend, Mr. Malema. Mr. Malema sees, and he doesn't greet the minister like, Minister, he says, Aaron! You can go first, no? For now. And I must say, those experiences at PMG, it's work, it was a social glue in another series of overlapping circles. Civil society, the state in the form of parliament, and business. And in many ways, so many years later, after the establishment of our constitution, if you look at that 30 circles right now, I think, sadly, civil society has been shot a couple of times with a very powerful shotgun. We are disparate, we are all over the place, we don't have a common position. And I've served in Nederland too, and I would say, sadly, the civil society constituency in Nederland is also found wanting. And so the role of the Parliamentary Monitoring Group within that context then and now is ever so much more critical. So thank you to you for the work that you do.
Yeah, I wanted to start by saying that in '98 I was part of that training. I was in the old assembly chamber, and I remember we took notes with our hands in those days as well. I was a volunteer at Great Crisis at the time. And I also wanted to just reflect that in addition to the excellence that we've come to, I think, take for granted in terms of the quality of notes taking, the quality of the record that's kept, there's another level of excellence that's served in civil society really strongly from PMG, which is the responsiveness. So while holding a firm, I suppose, I'll keep it an eye, a firm eye on the issue of independence, PMG not being seen to be biased, there's also a huge responsiveness to requests for information, and it's part of the culture that I've experienced over decades of the institution. And then I just wanted to loop in some ways back to where Alison had us, this thing around, you don't celebrate victories, you keep struggling at a game and hold ground, and then reflecting, see on your points about the changes that we've witnessed in Parliament, kind of closing the doors more and more over time. And just wanted to reflect again on this point of the intention of the structure in the democracy, yes, around transparency, but critically the People's Parliament notion, which Parliament, I've tracked it over the years, their public branding of themselves as a People's Parliament, a place for the people. And you can watch in a certain point in time, it just disappears. And the issue then becomes really here, and people can access us, write a submission. But then initially there's a really strong articulation of this notion that these are elected representatives and this is the site in the democracy through which the public acts, and not just have this kind of representative but the engaged role. So I just wanted to reflect on that and the comments that were made about who tends to access that space, private sector, academia, professionalized NGO-style civil society, and how the kinds of games Vidar speaks about other organizations have also worked on to spread that out and to recognize the linking role both the People's Assembly site but also the PMG website plays in helping organizations that are more grounded and that are around organizing, getting that information out so that we can fulfill more of, not fulfill more, I think struggle harder for this notion that is a space hold government to account through these elected reps. And I just want to say thank you, PMG. You know I love you. Oh wait, my last comment is I personally think that, and I believe I've stood in these shoes and acted on it, not just thought it, that it's really helpful for civil society organizations who are not PMG to think about how to support PMG with the rands and cents, because we need it to do the kind of work that others here have spoken about. So I do think thinking strategically in our fundraising strategies around how to support that has a benefit in our civil society landscape.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Moira Levy. I'm with the Institute for African Alternatives. I'm formerly of IDASA. Judith, we were all worked together at some time. I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate PMG, but thank PMG from the heart of one of those in civil society who relies completely on you and has done for many, many years. And it's a combination of your independence, but also your professionalism. You are always responsive to questions. And I think in this day of false information, you are so important because we can rely on your information. And I think, just to make one other point, if I may, this is not a personal thing, I hear your comments about civil society and its weakness and its struggle in the past, we've battled over the years. But I also think in the last while, particularly with the election from the electoral amendment bill and post-Zondo, civil society is standing up again and coming together again. And I think as we head for the next election, it's becoming a really important force, and we all know our responsibility. I just want to remind us of what Zondo said when he spoke a year after he handed over the reports. A year later, exactly a year later, spoke at the HSRC, and he reminded us of, well, the very real danger that state capture could happen again. But he also said, and I wrote this quote down, and I use it often in my work, he said, I believe in civil society, and I know that civil society are the ones who want to make sure that this never happens again, never, never, never. And I think it's thanks to organizations like PMG that we have the information we need that empowers us to be able to try and take up that role and responsibility. So thank you and congratulations on your great achievements. We love you.
Can I put it in a challenge? I just wanted to also very proud of PMG and especially the people with my work. But I wanted to put in a challenge around the question of young people and how are you working with young people to become enthusiastic about democracy, but also about this work of sustaining democracy and particularly transferring the value space in a way, in a time of great disillusionment. I'm saying that as a mother of three who are sort of in that late teens, early 20s, and who are sometimes saying, well, what's the point? And so I'm wondering if there is something, and see, I'm looking at you, but if there's something where that is receiving special attention, because actually you can. There's something here in how you've described work, the access and the excitement of actually understanding those workings. And it also made me think of the days at the Center for Conflict Resolution and how we were bright-eyed in 19 and 20, and there were people who've been in Condesa to press under their wings and said, you won't learn this in any book. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith, you wanted to...
I just wanted to come in. So I think it's the discussion around Parliament, and clearly what we've seen today is that Parliament matters. What matters in these committees, it matters what happens in committee. But around the corner from us lies our Parliament, a physical building in ruins, and I think it is something we need to acknowledge. And it struck me as I was walking down the road here that there were offices being refurbished for members of Parliament temporarily, funded by the Development Bank of South Africa. And so I think while we talk about Parliament, what is also important, perhaps advocacy point, but the building is important. And so I think we would do well to also focus on the fact that just as our democracy needs to be rebuilt, the physical building, which stands for so much and where so much history has been made, needs to be fixed, and government needs to do its work. So, and the second point I wanted to make is, you talked about committees and what happens, and of course they're the engine room of Parliament. But what I find very useful also about the PMG site is, in fact, the records around ministerial questions. So who answers, how many they answer, and how they answer them. And all of this tells us something about the quality of the institution. And those of us who've been around long enough have seen, you know, the juniorization of Parliament to a kind of capture, to a sort of, I don't know what we could call this phase, but certainly insipid is a phrase, is a word one could use, but there probably are harsher words you can use for the lack of oversight that there sometimes is. So those sorts of the replies that ministers give to questions, and I think civil society, there has been a utilisation of that. I mean, I think in the Helen Sisman Foundation used it very effectively, the minister's words in the recent case around the Zimbabwe permits matter, which they in fact, you know, used those words against the minister, who is often foot in mouth. But so I think that that is important. And then the other point around physical access. I mean, I remember, you know, one of the things at Parliament was always how one could get in, and I still think that, you know, PMG monitors should have kind of a special access. It was something we were not successful at when I worked at Edasa, but in those days there wasn't that much security. You could in fact hand your pass over the fence over here and just get in. But again, it tells us about the way in which the state has changed and the increased securitization of Parliament itself, access to committees, but also to the opening of Parliament and so on. And then lastly, I just want to say, because people are talking about the idea of the People's Parliament, and it almost sounds foreign now, because I think people go, Parliament, talk sharp, it doesn't matter. But I think today we've made the case of why it does matter. And I'm going to read something, a quote from that Madiba said to the address in Parliament in '99, and I'm actually going to read it off my phone. And just today I've been railing against people reading off their phones, but I'm going to have to do it. He said, because the people of South Africa finally chose a profoundly legal path to their revolution, those who frame and enact the Constitution and law are in the vanguard of the fight for change. And he carries on to say, it is here that the oversight of government has been exercised, and it is here that our society, in all its formations, has the opportunity to influence policy and its implementation. And those were words that Madiba said in 1999, and they're still very true. I think the colours of the flag are a little bit tattered, we're all tired, but it is a fight that we need to keep having and sticking to our knitting. And heard as examples, I think, of Black Sash and how it has been used as, PMG's work has been used as a leverage, is precisely what Sam Waterhouse, I think, was talking about, those linkages. So thanks very much, I'll stop there. But just to say to Rashad and Monique and colleagues whom I rely on quite heavily, thank you very much for always answering my emails. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. On that note, I'm going to ask Christian if you want to come. Christian's with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and whose generous support has made today possible.
Great. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, everybody on the panel. Thank you for everybody who is here. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is lucky enough to have been able to provide a little bit of support for the venue today, for the food, for the drink. I'd ask you very much to make sure that you sign the guest list on the way out, because otherwise the Germans don't pay. So, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a German political foundation. Our task is to promote democracy, and we do so in over 100 countries worldwide. We're associated with the Christian Democratic Union in Germany, the party of Angela Merkel. And we stand for multi-party democracy in a parliament, the rule of law through oversight, and the social market economy, which I can't make fit here, but is very important. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the board and the founding members and the founding organizations, and to the PMG, the professional and competent people that I interact with occasionally. Partners like the PMG make our work possible across the various countries that we operate in. Now, a previous colleague of mine always used to say, we must remember that civil society is not democratic. And the argument being, South Africans always say, oh, I don't like politicians, I don't like political parties, I'm going to join an NGO. An NGO aren't in Parliament to write the laws. They have an influence, but they are not democratic, they are self-selected. That being said, they can be pro-democratic. They can support the functioning of democracy by allowing voters and the suffrage to become more informed to make better choices. There is also civil society that is anti-democratic. You have foundations which don't necessarily support democracy, much like you have political parties that aren't necessarily in support of democracy. But thankfully, organizations like PMG exist that pursue the primary objective of making the voter more informed and improving the quality of its democracy. So PMG is not representative, but by sitting in those committee rooms, you certainly represent the people, and that is also important. As you described, it kept the doors of the committee rooms and Parliament open just by being there. So to me, PMG has a number of assets that I always stress to our visitors when they come to South Africa. Keeping Parliament open to the people, transparency for the voters, and for political parties to remain more competitive. It's a very important historical record. And then finally, the young people that work in Parliament for PMG are sensitized to politics and to Parliament. And I'd like to stress again, I think the number that was mentioned was 1,000. Is that right? 1,000?
Yeah.
That's just a drop in the ocean of the effect that you've had. Because young people talk to another, and they influence each other. And I think it can't be underestimated the reach that that has had in making people realize that Parliament exists and it's something that they can go to. So I think it's a really important component of the value that PMG has, is that young people are involved. Even though you thought that they were just a resource, but I think that they've become a main asset for PMG. So I've written something here about the challenges for civil society, but I'm going to skip that because we have newspapers. But I'd like to just mention something around advice. I love this thing that Alison said about, and then we thought about the website. It was 25 years ago. I think we're on a cusp of exactly the same scale of transformation, if not greater, through technology at the moment. If you've played with ChatGPT in the last couple of months, it's frightening and exciting at the same time. I think that it's going to be necessary for us to embrace the technology. It will allow us to speed up writing, allow the speeding up of analysis, but most importantly, it will allow us to disseminate knowledge in a tailor-made manner to each individual constituency. So if Alta has a particular question, or Judith, if you write to Rashad, there can be an AI bot that can give the right answer by drawing on the information that the monitors have collected accurately, thanks to the technology. So I expect PMG really to take a massive leap forward with society as we go through this technological innovation. And much like PMG spawned a number of different websites, the way that you work with AI will also spawn the transformation of democracy in South Africa coming up. So once again, congratulations to PMG. It's been an absolute pleasure to deal with you, and I hope that we work together for a number of years to come. Thank you.
And the final word is not mine. I'm going to invite my colleague, Nhlanhla, to come and do a word of thanks and close off our proceeding.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm very much aware that I am the person between you and the door, so I am going to be very brief. Thank you, Kali. Thank you, Kali, for introducing me. And Juliet spoke about me earlier on. I started at IDASA, and when I started, I do want to confess, I knew nothing about Parliament, absolutely nothing. And you guys mentored me, and through PMG, I got to know what Parliament is about, and I'm the person that I am today. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers, Alison, the panelists for their valuable contribution to our 25-year celebration event. As part of the commemoration, we have heard from many people and organizations who have indicated the importance and positive impact of PMG. This message has again been affirmed by the comments from the participants today. It is really gratifying to hear all the wonderful words that you have shared with us. Our gratitude as the board of PMG goes to each and every one of you for having taken the time out of your busy schedule. It's a very cool day today. I know you could have been anywhere else, but you chose to come here and celebrate with us. Thank you so much. Siyabonga. Enkosi. Our strategy as an organization takes stock of the strong comparative advantage we have built over almost 3 decades of work. Among other aspects, we are South Africa's leading parliamentary monitoring organization, so we enjoy deep expertise in civic technology tools. We are catching up with ChatGPT. We have board members. I'm telling you the truth. In each and every meeting, we have 2 board members who will keep updating us about ChatGPT, AI. We are taking stock of all the developments, and we are going to try and do our best. We also have a capital of trust and respect from Parliament and all other stakeholders. These considerations continue to shape and inform all our efforts under this strategy. As we embark on our next phase, it is important that we build on the progress and impact we have seen in our work to date. For instance, we will continue to provide comprehensive information on parliamentary activities on all our platforms. If you are not following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we are yes. Please follow us, because it is a promise. We are promising that we will continue sharing comprehensive information about the work of Parliament and also our MPs. It is a promise that we are making to you. We will double down on efforts to advance citizen participation and provide evidence-based research. PMG's legislative analysis and direct advocacy will be primarily orientated to issues that align with our areas of expertise, especially transparency, inclusion, accountability, civic space, and the digital agenda, amongst other things. Yet, we will selectively and responsibly engage in other thematic areas of work where this affords us critical opportunities for learning and impact, pave the way to new partnerships and inroads into our important political cycles, and where our direct involvement increases the likelihood of success. Our strategy inevitably takes stock of the changing context we face now and in the years to come in South Africa and globally. Chief amongst them is the need to continue work on the full realization of the principles of transparency, inclusion, accountability, which are all principles that are enshrined in our Constitution. It is a fact that the political landscape is changing in South Africa. It is also a fact that it's going to have a bearing on our work. Specifically, we need to be an important conduit and contributor in major processes that could significantly alter the country's system of governance, the electoral system, coalition dialogues, etc. We must also play our role in informing evidence-based debates during the upcoming 24 elections. We are very much aware as an organization that we just cannot ignore the upcoming elections because it's going to bring us a new parliament, and most people who have worked in parliament would know new MPs, new work. We still have to greet the new person. Did I know this thing? And new MPs come, you have to introduce yourself maybe 10 times before they really recognize who you are. So as PMG, we are very much aware of what is upcoming, especially after the elections. We hope our efforts will help inform citizens' choices on election day. Our work will remain critical to elevate the debate of integrity in politics and also to help rebuild the trust between people and their elected representatives. Global initiatives like the Open Government Partnership, OGP, and Sustainable Development Goals will remain important anchors to advance PMG priorities. PMG cannot do this alone. We need you, we need all of you. But we are also very much aware that we need Parliament because the success of our work is intrinsically premised on active outreach to and collaboration with Parliament, as it is the institution with the power to support PMG's agenda for better governance and greater political inclusion. We will also work with those stakeholders that hold complementary expertise or powers to support our strategic objectives. This includes political parties, independent offices, and constitutional commissions, specialized civil society organizations, and the media, as well as citizens who play a critical role in eliciting accountability from elected officials all year round. On a provincial level, we will expand the scope of our work. We will do so primarily by replicating and adapting our existing national toolkits. At the regional level, we will continue to exchange lessons and expertise with PMOs and regional parliamentary caucuses around Africa. South Africa is not an island, and we need to be conscious of that, and it is a decision that we have taken as the board that we are going to collaborate, we are going to work with other political monitoring organizations that are around the continent. And then there comes our funders. A special word of thanks to our funders and each and every one of you, especially all the South Africans who continue to trust us with their money. I know it's because they believe in the work that we do, and we are going to continue to be the brightest stars when it comes to ensuring that people have access to information. To our staff members, some of our staff members are over here, others are there, our brightest stars are over there. You met them as you were coming in. On behalf of the board, we would like to thank the staff for their dedication and excellent work. We also acknowledge the resilience that you showed, especially during COVID. As a board member, I was like thinking this Zoom thing, I wonder how is it all going to work? But I had that belief in our youngsters that they will know this thing. You know when they say, is that an old hand or a new hand? I knew our PMG monitors will be able to get this thing. So we need to acknowledge that. We do acknowledge that there was this change for all of us, and you still managed to do the work that needed to be done. Thank you so much for everything that you have put in. We know it takes a real team effort to do this kind of work, and we are immensely proud of your work. It fills us with great joy to toast to the next 25 years, and I will one load shedding in the day, but thank you so much for coming and being with us here today.
Thank you. And with that, I draw a close. I want to thank everybody who has contributed today. It's been really wonderful to be amongst our